Hi, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I want to welcome you all to another AMEA AgTech Exchange today with hiveonline. So we'll go to the next slide now. So yeah, for those who are either watching this in recording or just joining us for the first time, I'm Casey Harrison. I'm the Director of Impact and Learning at Neuro International, and I'm also the lead for the AgTech Working Group at AMEA. And we're going to be hearing a presentation from Matthew Mintz today, the CEO and co-founder of hiveonline. Next slide, Matt. For those of you who haven't participated in the AgTech Working Group before, or are just kind of catching up on where we are with our work, this is just a slide that lays out the priorities for this working group, one of which is these exchange webinars and recordings to build awareness of different opportunities and partnerships in the digital space for cooperative and farm organization development. And then we also are working presently on an AgTech roadmap, specifically focused in Kenya, to help identify the right bundles of digital tools for different types of farmer organizations at different levels of their development. Next slide, Matt. And with that, I want to welcome Matt and thank him for taking the time, and hiveonline for joining us today and in the 16th AgTech Exchange. And Matt, I'll pass it over to you to take us through your presentation and some interactive questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Casey. And thank you for AMEA for the opportunity to present. It's worth saying that hiveonline has presented before at AMEA about two and a half years ago or so, when we were far earlier in our development of what we're doing at hiveonline. But today, I think it was opportunity, and we discussed with Casey and the rest of the team what would be interesting as something to bring to the table here, and partly that's also what have we learned through that process over those sort of 2 years and earlier around implementing solutions and digital solutions in this space, hopefully to both gather feedback from the group and see whether there are things that resonate or other insights, but also as a sort of pointers that we've experienced in our journey that could be useful for other implementations as well. And obviously we'll focus quite a lot on the hiveonline products, and specifically our more agri-focused product, myCoop.online. But it's worth saying that we have a broader reach that is looks at other things like savings groups and electronic vouchers as well. So we've been in existence since actually about 2016 to 2017, although really pivoted into supporting sub-Saharan Africa and smallholders in the region at the beginning of 2020, which was obviously due to a pandemic kicking off was interesting times as well. Our background, my background, and Sophie, my co-founder's background, is working in globally significant banks in a range of sort of technology and business and change roles. And really the thing that drove both of us to set up hiveonline was the fact that traditional finance and is firstly not delivering the products and services that it really should do to support the people who need it most. But secondly, there's a set of technology out there that these traditional big banks especially are not really adopting quick enough that really could change the landscape. And we saw that as an opportunity to really make a difference and do some cool things. While I'm based in Sweden and Sophie's based in Denmark, 90% of our team is based in sub-Saharan Africa. We have teams in Mozambique, Kenya, Rwanda, development teams based in Kigali in Rwanda as well. And we very much want to build a team and a company that is balancing building compliant, scalable, globally significant solutions, but with local context and being built by the people who understand the real use cases and are able to engage with the people who are using these systems on a daily basis. Our key premise in what we're trying to do is to use the power of digitization to bridge the gap between groups and farmers who are typically really trying to do, to grow their businesses, to do good farming, to build a livelihood, but today are excluded both from finance and for access to markets as well. And we've also, from our experience, engaged with other organizations who want to be in that ecosystem, such as NGOs, banks, supply chain, and government, who want to work with these groups, but due to either geographic issues or lack of information, for example, just find it very difficult to work with these groups. And our sort of primary thesis is, if we can use digitization to both provide the transparency, the data, the connections, linkages, and payments to bridge that gap, we can create a virtuous cycle that can really include these communities into a wider ecosystem there. So, and I suppose that really fits into a sort of a win-win in what we're trying to achieve for all sort of players in that ecosystem. So for organizations like cooperatives, really, yes, bringing business awareness and access to credit is obviously a big piece, but also bringing in the NGO sector to support, help with, obviously some of the big trends around investment in climate resilience, and combating sort of challenges with female inclusion and women's inclusion into the picture as well. But also, this does make sense for the other ecosystem partners. Financial services want to engage with these groups. They want to expand their market. They see these groups as a growing market that they can support if they can actually just bridge that gap. Similarly, actually, a lot of the off-taker groups that we talk with say, we have a supply challenge. We want to work with these supplier groups because we need to get access to more produce, and good quality produce. And how do we do that? So really, for us, it is about creating those linkages across the network. And how do we do that? A little bit about sort of where we've come and what we're doing right now. So most of our traction, when we started back in 2020 in sort of sub-Saharan Africa, that really focused on starting in Mozambique. We're partnered there with a range of different organizations in the ecosystem, but from the start have been working with AMPCM, which is the Association of Modern Cooperativism in Mozambique. Partnered also with a Norwegian NGO called Norgesvel, backed by NORAD funding, for a program really aiming to support small cooperatives, 20 to 50 farmers, in typically the cashew value chain, to both provide access to credit and working with MFIs, as well as off-taker networks as well. So we have linkages with, actually, the logo in the middle there hasn't missed the names, but it's Tableau Tech, which is an off-taker platform. And then we have partnerships with Microbanco Confianza and actually other MFIs in progress, in order to fulfill that sort of need for access to greater forms of credit into these groups as well. We're also in, I'll just try, what's happened there? Apologies, just give me 1 second. Why are these slides not? There we go. We're also in Kenya, although that is something that we really established our team relatively recently. We're working on a program there with the Association of Women in Agriculture, backed by Rabobank and Rabobank Foundation and the Swiss Capacity Building Facility. Again, to help digitize small cooperative and self-help groups who are both producing but also are unbanked, and bringing them into the economy there. And we are also have an MOU with KTDA, which is the Kenyan Tea Development Agency as well, which we're hoping to work with quite soon. But I wanted to just talk through some of the challenges that we've faced in implementing digital solutions, and some of these are definitely not a surprise, but also wanted to show some of the ways that we've worked through in trying to tackle those things, but also wanted to sort of create this as a bit of a interactive session. So we've created a few polls just to get feedback across the group about what the feeling is from the other people in the room around some of these challenges. But obviously, sort of first up is always the case of lack of infrastructure. Implemented digital solutions, and especially ones that rely on a large amount of digital infrastructure and data specifically. How do you combat that when typically you need, connectivity challenges are always a challenge, but also access to devices, and literacy levels are a challenge as well. And I think one of the other things that we've noticed as part of this challenge is that the people who do have a higher level of access to technology and digital skills are typically men, and hence women are disproportionately affected by this. So those were the challenges that really drove us to how can we look at that. But I wanted to sort of get an idea from the room of what that sort of where the challenges fit and the priority of those. So I don't know, Felipe, if you could open up the first survey here. So I just wanted to gather sort of which of the following infrastructure challenges do you believe is the most significant barrier to digitization in smallholder farmer groups in sub-Saharan Africa? Please feel free to vote. It'd be great to see what your thoughts were, whether that was primarily limited access to reliable internet connectivity, lack of affordable and accessible smartphone devices, insufficient power supply to charge all these electronic devices that are needed, or the lack of digital literacy and general literacy of users. Give it 10 more seconds and then we'll go through the answers. We're still waiting for a couple of responses, but I suppose one of them might be me as well. So. Cool. Okay, so looks like from the we've ended the poll. Can everyone see the full responses there?
Yes, the poll's up.
Cool. Awesome. Great. So I think the two sort of front runners are from this group are the access to connectivity and the digital literacy and general literacy of users, and then obviously lack of access to devices is something that is a piece of the picture as well. I think this to some extent does resonate with what our experiences are, because connectivity is a big challenge, and the literacy side is a challenge as well. So I'm going to do I close that? Yeah, there we go. So if I go to the next slide, I've got a bit of a clash with, there we go. So these are some of the solutions we've taken in our solution, and I'll do a demo after the end of a few slides to explain exactly what that looks like. But essentially, for us, one of the things we tried to focus on is engaging with groups rather than individuals. That really reduces the amount of technology that's needed and the amount of connectivity and education, because we work with essentially one co-op manager or secretary of a savings group, or an agent or representative, who's then able to gather data and do services for the rest of the group. So gathering production plans, for example, one co-op manager would do that on behalf of all the group members. We've built the app as a web app, so that it can work on as many devices as possible, so that it can actually work on a smartphone, a tablet, actually a laptop as well. And yes, there are always challenges with different types of devices, but as long as you've got a web browser, we feel pretty confident we can load that rather than having to be an installer, etc. Connectivity from day one has always been a challenge, and we're constantly doing more and more to improve on that. Essentially, it's never ultimately fixed, but we've built a lot of offline capability into what we do as well as doing some things around making it multilingual, and also in our approach on training and engaging with group members, we actually have tried to engage with the more digitally savvy group members and get them to be potentially using the app if in some contexts, rather than getting everyone to do that and having to train everyone there. There we go. The second challenge that we've really seen is that we can make these digital connections, but it really is about building that trust in this ecosystem. Obviously, we know about the challenges bridging the gap, but it really is, okay, so how do you then prove that I can either lend to these groups, or that I can buy, or an off-taker can buy produce from these groups as well? That is a challenge, and I think we've tried to take a sort of high data approach to be able to provide as many data points as possible into fixing that. But perhaps we can go to the second survey question, just to see what the room thinks around some of this. So our belief, well, actually, I won't lead the witnesses here, but how crucial do you believe it is for smallholder farmers to establish trust and share relevant information in order to effectively make this work? I think there are some aspects of it, as long as you join the dots, then maybe it will happen, right? But it'd be great to see sort of different views. While you're doing that, I'm going to shut my window so that you don't get the background noise. Cool. So we've had a few responses come in. I don't know whether we want any, we're waiting for any more. Cool. Okay, interesting. So I think we'll take 5 as the number, but essentially, yeah, it's clear to see that a lot of people think that it's very crucial, and I think that resonates with what we're doing. I can understand that there probably are some nuances around it might be possible to do some things, and so I understand the second the weighting there about it just being crucial rather than essential. But it's definitely something that we've tried to work on in how we've approached this. So what we've tried to do as far as we can share the results now, sorry. Yeah, so you'll be able to see there that the 4 out of the 5 thought it was very crucial, and 1 thought it was crucial, but I think it resonates with what we were thinking. So some things that we've tried to really build into this is, okay, so we know that it's probably difficult to build up enough confidence in individual farmers who are completely, lacking of track record and things like that. But then let's approach the group first and use the power of the group, both from an ability to sort of diversify risk, and also knowing that there should be an alignment of incentives who are trying to work in the right direction and have already shown some commitment in working as part of that group. We're very much, especially with our financial background, looking at trying to build the KYC, your know your customer information, and digital financial data to prove that track record, and we'll show that in the app in a minute. But also the other pieces of the footprint of those farmers and those groups that isn't just financial, but is relevant. So in Mozambique, as we work with cashews, the ability to be able to show that a farmer owns 20 cashew trees that will be producing a regular income, an annual income, is almost as important as actually being able to show how much they have in their savings, because it does show the potential for income. And a lot of the time, when you purely focus on the financial side, you don't get the full picture. Another thing that we've also seen is that for us, it's important not to just focus on only providing credit. That is one thing that a lot of the groups and farmers obviously really want. But for this to be sustainable and for it to make sense from both sides, we need to make sure that this is long-term viable, and hence linking and providing market access at the same time as access to credit, so that groups can invest their the loans that they're getting and use that to generate higher quality, higher quantity of produce, and be able to sell that, rather than that just purely contributing to more post-harvest loss, for example, and then having trouble paying off those loans. So that, for us, feels like a virtuous cycle that we want to support. And it also means that these are better, less risky opportunities to engage with from a financial perspective. The third challenge we really saw was the need for long-term solutions. Engaging with farmers, there is a little bit of a level of sort of donor fatigue with some short-lived solutions in some areas, but also working with NGOs, it is sort of more difficult in when projects are being funded on sort of annual or multi-year programs that then ultimately do come to an end. And that's one thing we've tried to build into what we're doing, is provide that ability for a sort of a longer term solution. But also then hence, you know, corporates do want to play in this space, but really struggle as well. But again, so let's go to a third and final survey question, just to get the feeling in the room around this long-term aspect. But what do we think, what kind of support do we believe is essential for the smallholder farm groups to sustain digitization in what they're doing in the long term? Is that access to affordable and reliable infrastructure? Is it the need for training on a continuous basis and capacity building? Financial resources for technology, so they can actually get access to the technology and adopt it, or the ability for them to grow and collaborate for these groups? Cool. So let's right. So I think I can end the poll and then share the results. So you can see out of the 5 responses, majority have sort of said that access to affordable and reliable digital infrastructure is sort of essential and key. And I think that sort of resonates partly with where we're sort of going in our experience in trying to implement this. But also, I do agree with the person who sort of said the growth and collaboration opportunities for groups is also a key part. One of the interesting things is when we've tried to implement things, we've seen that if there are growth opportunities, there are people who will go out their way to try and access it because they see the opportunity for growth, and they have a huge capacity to learn and to make these things work themselves if they can see the benefit in doing it. We've seen in the savings group world, 2 savings groups, one that was implementing our solution and one not. Actually, there was a large swathe of people who moved to the digitized savings group because they wanted to have those growth opportunities, because they can see the growth opportunities there. Cool. So how did we really work on that? So firstly, for us, the key part is then building a sustainable business model, so that we can be longer term and without needing sort of relying on donor funding or NGO support for what we do. Our model, and it goes to the other piece about affordability, is we do not charge the groups themselves. We have a revenue model predominantly based on monetizing the linkages and taking fees from the lenders and from the off-takers who are interacting with these groups. From our engagement and partnership so far, a lot of those MFIs, for example, see the benefit because it costs them a lot of money to engage with these groups right now, and we reduce that cost. In a similar way, actually working with the NGOs that we have, we've had reported 30% reduction in costs for programs because they've been able to monitor their groups digitally rather than having to send people regularly out to these groups to engage and monitor how their savings are going and how their finances are as well. But I think the other part is we're really trying to do a whole ecosystem approach to bring other people into this that isn't just focusing on the groups themselves, so that this is a catalyst to opening up other forms of support that isn't just what we do, but is taking that whole ecosystem side. The other thing I would also say is that from our perspective, with a financial background, we're very keen that this has to be a robust, compliant, secure solution for the longer term. And something that we've built in from day one is that element of building robust financial solutions. In Mozambique, we're working as part of a regulatory sandbox to become financially regulated and licensed to provide mobile money services and third-party credit. And actually, there aren't that many providers in the Mozambique ecosystem who are there. So for us, that's a big stamp of this is a platform that is safe for consumers to be using and is planning to be around for a long time. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to sort of talk through those challenges because I think it's useful from a learning perspective. So this is the myCoop solution, and I won't talk about it. It's far better if I demo it instead very quickly. But just to show you what I'm sort of explain what I'm showing to you now. So this is the myCoop app. As I mentioned, it's a web-based app. So I'm showing this in Chrome right now on my desktop, but I've actually changed the form factor so it fits onto a mobile form factor. But this is exactly how it would load up on a mobile device with a Chrome browser. There is the ability to actually install it as a web app, and it appears on your app list and everything like that, and has a little bit more app-like feel. But it automatically, every time you access it and access the internet, it will automatically update the app as well. And this app is used by the co-op manager rather than every single member of the group. So they're the ones who do all the record keeping and everything for the individual members. So the first thing, obviously, as part of that is who are those members and how do we gather information on them. So we manage a sort of a member list for each of the cooperatives, and we can go into each one of these, and you can find their information, how old they are, and fill it out with addresses, what role they are in the group, and other things about their links to other third-party platforms that have other additional information about them. We also have the ability to manage non-members, so people who aren't part of the cooperative or the farmer group, but we might want to still engage with them and have their contact details, for example, or message them about certain things. So, for example, guards or sprayers or service providers or agri-dealers, for example, there. The real part where it then starts to get sort of gathering data and really moving into the agri space is we manage and gather production plans on behalf of all the farmers within the group on those specific crops. We manage that in a way of both gathering the projections ahead of time, and then the deliveries when they deliver those and sell those crops to the cooperative, as well as managing them the payment and the ability to track inputs as well to those crops. So we also then provide a review feature so that they can across the that harvest look at whether they delivered on time, how much they delivered compared to what they said they were going to do, and how much they received for that, which allows that conversation to happen a little bit more about how to improve and how to improve reliability, and formalize a little bit more, as well as also, I suppose, we're gathering that information that we're then able to share with permission from the cooperatives to third parties, in order for them to be able to, for example, pre-buy crops or arrange for purchase of crops across the system. We also have summaries. I won't go into it right now, but it allows you to see, obviously, per crop what the cooperative or farmer group will be aggregating on their harvest period as well. And then when we capture the delivery for those crops, we also then try and tie that to the payment to the farmer. Firstly, we do that sort of tracking the cash transaction, which we record. We actually put that onto the blockchain so that it's super indelible. We can't change it, you can't change it, but is actually able to be third-party verified rather than just relying on us as a system. And that really is the start of where we start to log the financial footprint for these groups and the farmers who are interacting with them. So we can start to see here individual members of the group, and they get, this person got paid for their yield purchase, this person received a third-party loan, etc. from the group. And we're also able to then, the co-op manager is able to then add other additional records and build that track record of the cooperative as they are doing business. Over time, as we expand in what we're doing, we aim to facilitate a lot more of these interactions. So we capture these things as part of a process and capture the payments and the transactions as part of a process, rather than purely having to be accounted. But this is a sort of a stepwise process that we're going through there. The only other thing sort of worth sort of sharing is that then we've then built on top of that the ability to both do more types of messaging, and we have notifications and things in order to communicate with these groups, but also then additional learning content that we take from third-party services. We don't feel we don't want to be the experts in the education side, but we have the ability to deliver that to these groups via this mechanism. The last thing that I didn't bring up previously, but is worth showing, is that we also then have aggregated dashboards that we're able to then share with third parties, such as NGOs or other partners who are working with this with these groups. So that let me just show you the quick dashboard here. This really starts to show the amount of data that we're able then to bring into the picture and inform a lot of decision making around what these groups are doing and how they're doing it. For example, we have the ability to, when this loads up, things like we're able to track behaviors between male and female members of the cooperative, know exactly which crops are being registered, and everything like that across the system, although it's typically being a bit laggy right now. So maybe I'll come back to this in a second. So that was a quick whistle-stop demo through the platform. Just wanted to very quickly mention sort of where we're sort of planning to go longer term with what we're doing and building on what we're doing. So right now we're sort of in a growth phase about trying to onboard more groups and really start to convert those connections to the ecosystem. So we're building MOUs, signing contracts right now to be able to facilitate lending into these groups right now. So we haven't managed to do loans directly to these groups. We are signing contracts literally days away where that was a commitment that groups will be, MFIs will be lending into these groups because they see the benefit. But some of the other things we're looking at is we have a VSLA, a savings group solution, and we have a cooperative solution. We're actually hoping to start digitizing the savings groups that are in partnership with the cooperatives, and really starting to build a full picture of those farmers from their savings as well as their cooperatives. We have an e-voucher platform built into the solution so that an NGO, for example, or an agri supplier can distribute vouchers and voucher-based inputs or services to the groups. Again, it's based on the blockchain, so it's super indelible. We can track all the way from donor down to recipient and track what they received at that time. We've got a lot of interest around including carbon credits as another source of income into these groups, and be able to use the same sort of financial rigor around payments as we could do for carbon credits, etc. And as I said, we're expanding right now. We're just starting in Ghana and also looking at expanding into Rwanda and Zambia because we have smaller projects or influence there. But generally looking to maximize our impact and scale where we can. We've built this as a scalable solution with our sort of old world banking background. This is a very robust, scalable solution, and I think it really works at a larger level when we can reach that scale as well. But that was a whistle stop tour through that as well. But I wanted to open it up for sort of any questions, any insights and sort of comments on some of the polls or anything that people might want to raise as a talking point.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. That was a great presentation. We had some questions come through in the chat. I'm just going to take them in order because they're sort of categorized already in that way. So I'll ask Mark if he wants to come off mute, or I can repeat your question. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I just want to be sure. The myCoop.online thing, that's related to the ILO myCoop, is it?
No.
Ah, okay. Okay. Right. Okay. So, okay. So probably my question isn't as relevant, but still, I guess the question is, okay, you've done your pilot in Mozambique, you're getting going in Kenya. Yeah. I mean, so like, there must be some bugs in the system, put it this way. You must find that some things are taking much more time to, I don't know, ensure that you get credible data and things like that. Because as much as you digitize things like member records, for example, we know, so like, the undigitized versions, they're very unreliable. So yeah, there could be all sorts of problems there, and it'd just be nice to understand what the real problems you've got with that, and how you end up with a set of data that you can trust, but also even more importantly, so like the potential off-takers or financial service partners can trust. And
I think it also goes back to the sort of the first part of your question about sort of our scaling as well, and some of the challenges there. So firstly, on the financial side, it does take a while to build up a set of data. Right, so we have been building data with the partners we have in Mozambique for like over a year now, and we are just getting to the point now where we're getting the volume of data and the quality of data that we want to be able to bridge into the financial services. And as you say, it's not an easy thing to do as far as quality goes as well. There's a couple of things that we're trying to do there. One is to take a wider approach than just the financial transactions, right? To look at both the group and over time, I could also see sort of more community people vouching for other people in the group or signing those things off. And obviously, predominantly, we will start with lending to groups rather than to individuals, which de-risks somewhat in the picture. The second part then is our belief is that people care about the data when it's related to financial transactions. People care about the money, right? They make sure that they get paid what they need to get paid. So we try and actually gather enough information at the point of payment for other things. So what quality is your crop? How much are you delivering? When are you delivering it? Is on the same form as how much you're getting paid for that. Okay, so it's not a, tell me in 3 months' time, how much did you produce at harvest time? We try and do that accurately there. We also have the ability, especially with with partnerships with NGOs, for example, to do reconciliations. So we have an element of managing a cash balance compared to a cash balance compared to the records that they're putting into the app, so that an NGO could do an audit and show and see what cash balance they actually have in their safe or their systems or a banking account compared to what they're recording in the application. All of those type of things are metrics that we gather and are able to then use to help the third parties to infer trustworthiness. So what level of, how much do they reconcile on a monthly basis between their cash balance and the record keeping that they've done in the app? If that's 5%, that's a lot better than 50%, right? So we can build a lot of those measures that we feed into that picture. But it's an ongoing challenge, right? And I think as we get better at this and can prove that this is a model that works, then we can build that confidence. But it's something that, yeah, we have to do a lot of sort of explanation with our third parties to build that confidence.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've got lots of other questions, but I'll let I know there's other questions in the list. So Casey, I'll let other people have a go.
No, thanks, Mark. It's a really interesting question. I think I had one in a similar line too. So we can circle back to that. You know, as you expand the services, the carbon credits, that verification process becomes all the more challenging. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah.
A whole other box for us to open up. But I want to get back to the questions that were asked in the chat. Felipe, did you want to start with your question? And I think Christine, you had something sort of in a similar line from your experiences at ACB IVOCA working with financial service providers. So Felipe, I'll pass it to you first, or Christine after that.
Thank you, Casey. No, indeed, I was just wondering, like trying to think about who would be your ideal partners. I was just wondering what are the process for you to actually start new partnerships in different contexts and places, right? So, for example, in Mozambique, how did you connect with your partners, especially the business development service providers, like the organizations you work with, to provide training for farm organizations and financial service providers as well? Yeah.
So, I mean, typically our work to date has been predominantly with NGOs, and I would say somewhat forward-thinking NGOs who really see that there needs to be a longer term solution that isn't just that lives till the end of their program, in a sense. And that's where we've been really lucky to work with Norg as well, to start with there. But we've worked with several other partners and actually other members of the AMEA network who've also worked with us on that. I think that the piece is that the partners we look for have a good balance of both wanting to do impact, but also realizing this needs to be sort of commercial in the ecosystem perspective. We need to engage the private sector alongside the development sector in how this works. But also we're seeing far more awareness from corporates, especially around the risk to specific supply chains. So moving almost a little bit away from the CSR perspective to actually, hang on a second, so my supply chains rely on these groups to provide the produce that we need. With climate change coming, we need to be able to support these groups to be able to support our business and to de-risk our business as well. So yeah, at the moment we're looking at organizations across both sides of the spectrum, but ultimately who want to be able to support with these groups and have an engagement. Typically, so we're just building our own sort of field officer capability, at least in Mozambique, but typically we work via other partners on the ground. We feel that we're providing the financial technology element, and whilst we're growing into the on the ground level, we think there are lots of other incumbent organizations who are more skilled and have better relationships with groups in order to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think building on that too, I mean, you started to touch on this point, but it was from Christine, was, specifically working with other fintechs or in that, the other outside of the NGO partnerships, like kind of sharing some of your experience with the FSPs that you've had, the financial service providers that you've worked with, how that kind of links. My question to kind of add to that, maybe if you can share some of it, is how you mentioned the revenue model, monetizing, those financial transactions to limit the cost that's left for the farmer organization or for the farmers themselves. Negotiating that space must be very difficult and time consuming for you all. So how have you approached that, and where do you see the value for each of the partners in those negotiations?
Interestingly, just to be completely honest, right now, the negotiation hasn't been as hard as you'd think it would be, because for these groups, this makes sense. For these MFIs, this makes sense. They don't have the capability to do that, and they want to expand their reach. And actually then we feel that this fits at a price point which reduces their cost and reduces and increases their sort of visibility of these groups, which means that actually it's a better prospect for them than sending people out in jeeps and motorbikes with clipboards to engage and onboard potentially new lenders and things like that. I suppose the one thing that longer term will become a challenge that we are aware of and want to work with and sort of trying to build some principles around is that, so yes, it cost saves for the MFIs, but we also want this to have an impact as far as reducing the rates that these MFIs are charging. Right, and we can longer term, I believe we can do that through competition, but also providing more comfort and information to these financial institutions about so that they can reduce their rates because the defaults are lower and they're lending to the right people who can actually repay. That's a longer term thing that we're working on. But right now, we're having good conversations with quite a lot of institutions in the space. At least in our more mature markets, who see this as, we want to work with these groups, we just don't have the technical capability to do it now, and are willing to work and sort of agree to the fee structure we have. Maybe we're too cheap.
No, it's interesting. I mean, you're reducing their customer acquisition costs. So that makes sense. It's practically speaking. Christine, did you have something you wanted to add to that question or anything else? Sorry, I didn't give you a chance to contextualize the question in the chat.
No, that was great. And I think for us, it kind of depends on the country and where a lot of the challenges in working with FSPs are. In countries, I think, where financial institutions are more aware of digitization, are already starting to integrate a bit into their work, it seems like bringing these platforms are a bit easier and they're excited about it. And but in, like, for example, we're working in Burkina Faso, and we've really had a lot of challenges in working with financial service providers because they're not really ahead of the curve in the digitization space, and there's a lot of low connectivity. And we've really been having to kind of like sell the business case for these types of products, and it's been a challenge. But I think, yeah, like what you were talking about, and reducing their cost and selling that kind of business case aspect of it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. Thanks I feel like you responded well. Thanks.
Yeah, but I think there's another bit I can add. One of the things is, unfortunately, you're right, there are some places where right now it's not necessarily mature enough for us to go into. I mean, we're in Mozambique, and I think there are the attitudes and desire to do that. But yeah, Burkina is actually one place we've sort of been asked to look at going, and hasn't been top of our list because of that. The other thing that is just an interesting thing that we see, and in our slightly rebellious way of where we'd like to go longer term, is I think by assets, the savings group network in Niger is actually the biggest bank, right? If you add up all of the savings groups, and they're actually organized in federations, right? They're actually the biggest bank by savings. So in some senses, the capital, there's more capital there than is available to each individual group. and we're aiming to make remove the friction and create these linkages between the ecosystem, and that includes group to group as well. So over time, and yes, regulations and things need to be built into that and factored into how we do that, but there is potential for more innovative models once we get to certain levels of scale with the regions around cross lending between a wealthy group could be lending to a group that wants to take a loan, for example, and how we do that as well. So and that's sort of going back to the start of where I said about traditional financial services not delivering the services and products, is that there needs to be some disruption in that space as well. We're trying to sort of lay some of the foundations, hopefully, so that we can get to challenging some of the viewpoints of who are good customers and what are good products, but that takes time as well.
That's a really great example. Go ahead, Mark, with your hand up. We have a few minutes left, so we'll try to wrap up in the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's why I was putting my hand up. Yeah, no, I mean, I know we've got a limited number of people on the call, but I think there might be slight timing thing, post convening and things like that, as well as other things. But I mean, I think we can still make an effort after this to sort of see how we sort of spread the message about what Hive's trying to do, and also look specifically at your priority countries, because I mean, you've got down there Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda. Kenya, Muslin's on the call now, and she's already put in the chat that she's interested, and they've got that big RK FinFA program from EFAD that's going to get up and running as well, and there could be various other things that come to mind. So I think Merslin probably is interested herself, but also could spread the word within the Kenya network and see what comes of that. Ghana, we haven't got a network, but we actually, strangely enough, have got things like a BDS roadmap process running there. And that's got Agra and Agriterra involved, as well as many others. And so I think pushing this information to Josephine, particularly in Ghana, would be a good idea. So we can do that. And then Rwanda, we don't have a network, but we do have a possible network that's the formation stage is being led by an organization called RISEM, which is heavily into microfinance. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few post webinar things we can do. So I just wanted to flag that, so we make a note of that, and we see what we can do afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as I said, we're trying to build a scalable solution. I think that for some of the larger NGOs and other corporates as well, but focusing on the NGOs, I understand localization and why that's the right thing to do, but also if you're looking for a solution that you can implement across all of your programming, that means you're standardized, that your impact metrics, for example, can be very standardized, and we can help tailor that. That's something we're looking at, how we can help, start in one country with one NGO, but then also use that to then implement in other programs from similar NGOs, provided they've got that overarching view as well. It's something we're talking with one AMEA partner about, but we'd like to do that more as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, us, we're definitely into standardized metrics, but obviously it's tailored, localized approaches. So people who really understand how to create market opportunities. So yeah, for sure. Casey, I'll hand back to you.
No, I think that's a great place to end, is how to continue to follow up from here. Just want to thank you again, Matt, for taking the time to do this presentation. It's all been recorded. I think we can stop the recording now if we want to, or it was already stopped. That's great. So we're going to transition